Welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. We're going to be looking at systems thinking in life sciences today.
Absolutely. Should be fascinating.
We've got that intriguing research from BMC Bioinformatics we were talking about.
The 2023 article, yeah.
Yeah, that one. Should give us a lot to unpack, that's for sure. Get ready to, kind of shift how we think about life itself.
It really is about changing perspectives, not just looking closer, but understanding that everything in life sciences, even the simplest things, they're all intricate networks,
It's like when you open up your phone
right?
and you see all those tiny little parts, and they all have to work together perfectly.
Exactly. Now apply that to a single cell or a virus or even just a molecule. That's what systems thinking lets us do. It helps us see those layers of complexity.
It's like, what's that thing, a fractal, where you zoom in and you just keep seeing the same patterns over and over again?
It is a similar concept, and this is where the work of Mario Bunge comes in.
Oh, right, the physicist.
Yes. His Bunge Systemist Ontology, BSO for short, he said there's no such thing as simple. Everything's a system, made up of interacting parts.
So even an atom, which we used to think was the smallest thing, is actually its own little system.
Exactly, a mini-universe. And Bunge really challenged how we think about cause and effect. It's not linear, it's all these interconnected systems.
Like that butterfly effect thing. A butterfly flaps its wings and it causes a hurricane somewhere else.
Kind of. So let's say you're developing a new drug.
Okay.
A traditional approach might just focus on how that drug interacts with one specific thing in the body, like a protein or something.
Like a lock and key.
Yeah. But systems thinking, that takes into account the entire network. What other molecules are involved? What are the downstream effects on cells, on organs? We have to understand those relationships.
So it's not just seeing the pieces, it's seeing how they all fit together.
Exactly. It's about the bigger picture. To develop better treatments, we need to understand those connections so we can avoid unintended consequences.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually wrap our heads around these systems? I mean, they can get really complex.
You're right. And that's why we have things like the system composition diagram.
Okay, what's that?
Think of it like a map, but instead of places, we're mapping the different parts of a system and how they work together. You can zoom in on the details or zoom out to see the whole system.
So if we were looking at like a virus.
Let's say coronavirus.
Awesome.
With the system composition diagram, we could map out the virus's own systems. You know, how it replicates, how it infects cells.
How we could map out the human body systems too, right? Like
Yeah.
the respiratory system and how our immune system responds.
Exactly. And then we connect them on the diagram so we can start to actually visualize those points of interaction, where the virus is vulnerable, how our bodies fight back, where treatment could be most effective.
Wow, like seeing the whole battlefield from above. You can see how everything interacts.
Precisely. And it really helps us understand those feedback loops and emergent properties we talked about.
Right.
One thing that makes coronavirus so tricky, it can trigger what's called a cytokine storm in some patients.
A cytokine storm, is that like a weather thing?
Not exactly, no. Although it can feel like a storm in your body. Cytokines, they're like these signaling molecules, part of the immune response.
So they're how our immune system communicates.
Yeah, exactly. But in a cytokine storm, the body goes a little haywire, releases way too many of these cytokines, and instead of just targeting the virus, they start attacking healthy tissues too.
Oh, so it's like an overreaction to the immune system.
Exactly. And that's when things can get really bad. It causes all this inflammation and it can damage organs.
I see. And this is where those feedback loops come in.
Right. So normally those cytokine signals, they would kind of regulate themselves like a thermostat.
Yep.
But with the cytokine storm, that feedback loop breaks down. The immune response just keeps escalating.
Wow. So our own bodies can turn against us.
In a way, yeah. And the system composition diagram, that's how we can visualize all of this, how these interactions can lead to things like a cytokine storm.
So we can see those unintended consequences, those emergent properties you were talking about.
Exactly. It's not just A causes B, it's all these interconnected systems.
I'm starting to get it. This
Yeah.
has been super helpful. We've been talking a lot about research and medicine and stuff. But how does this apply to like normal life?
Well, it can actually help you make better decisions in all sorts of areas.
Really?
Think about personal finances.
Okay.
Most people, they think about income and expenses separately, but a systems approach, that would be looking at them as connected, part of a larger system.
So like if I overspend on my credit card, that's going to affect how much money I have for rent, which then impacts.
Exactly. And there are feedback loops there too. If you spend less than you earn, that's a positive feedback loop.
It's all connected.
Right. And just like with the cytokine storm, small changes can snowball into big consequences.
So if we understand those loops, we can make better financial decisions.
Absolutely. Small changes can have big impacts, just like we saw with the cytokine storm.
Right, right, yeah. So it's all about seeing those connections, not
Yeah.
just in our bodies, but in everything.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating area, the brain.
Oh, wow. The final frontier. We've talked about cells, viruses, finances, but the brain, that's got to be the most complex system there is.
It's incredibly complex, billions of neurons, trillions of connections. But even there, systems thinking is crucial.
So how do you even begin to study something like that?
Well, take consciousness, for example.
Okay.
Instead of trying to find one single spot in the brain where consciousness happens, researchers are using systems approaches.
So it's more about how different parts of the brain work together.
Exactly. It's like, think about a melody. It's made up of individual notes, but it's the relationships between those notes that create the music.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And this approach is helping us understand other things too, right? Like memory and learning.
Absolutely. We have these computational models now that can simulate how networks of neurons interact.
Wow. So we can actually see how memories are formed.
In a way, yes. And how we learn language, how we develop other cognitive abilities.
It's amazing how far we've come.
It is. And these insights, they're not just theoretical. They have the potential to transform how we treat neurological disorders, psychiatric disorders.
Oh, right. Because if we understand how the system works, then we can.
We can target the root causes, develop more effective therapies.
Wow. This whole deep dive has been incredible. We started with the tiniest things, like molecules. And now we're talking about the human brain.
It's all connected.
It really is. Systems thinking has given us a whole new way of seeing the world.
And this is really just the beginning. There's so much more to explore, so much we still don't know.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's about always asking new questions.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.